My name's Rich Dolan. I'm a presenter here at I think this is the 4th X conference, if I'm not mistaken, here in Gaithersburg, Maryland. I gave a talk early in this conference. I think I called it The Challenges of UFO Disclosure. Really broke it down into 3 parts, trying to give something for the newcomers, as I often try to do. So presenting what I think to be some very strong documentary evidence for the reality of UFOs. As many of us who've been researching this field know, there's a large abundance of documentation showing that there's a real phenomenon that is out there that people are interacting with, including global militaries, including the United States military. So I spent about the first third of my talk dealing with some of that evidence and trying to show maybe an interested skeptic why this is a topic worthy of further consideration. The second third of my talk dealt with how I am seeing the structure of the secrecy working. Obviously, you can only do this in summary form because this is a pretty big, intense topic. But really the question is there, are there any programs that are covertly designed to study ET technology or some kind of technology not made by human hands? And I think the answer to that is yes. I explained during my presentation why I think that is the case. There certainly are a large number of leaks from some pretty credible sources dealing with this. I also think when you look at the structure of the U.S. military, that especially within special access programs and the like, that there's reason to say that these are increasingly dominated by private contractors, not always and not necessarily defense personnel. So, the question of who is in control of the secret is an open question. It doesn't mean that the government is not a player here, that standard political process is irrelevant. I don't think that, but we're dealing with something a bit more complex than just standard politics here. And then the third part of my talk dealt with something that really almost never discussed or even written about very much in public, which is the nature of these other beings. Okay? If you are going to acknowledge that there's a UFO phenomenon that's real, then at a certain point, I think we need to ask ourselves, who are these other beings? How, if there's ever a disclosure about the reality of this, how is that going to affect our society, and how are we going to deal with them? Are we going to be able to deal with them? One thing that has occurred to me in all of my research into this topic is that all the accounts of the extraterrestrials that people have described, they all seem to be very highly telepathic. They all seem to have the ability to manipulate and even control a human mind to varying degrees. For example, the accounts of people whose memories have been almost split off following an encounter with extraterrestrials. They have an ability to deal with us in a way that we do not seem to have an ability to deal with them in a likewise fashion. So dealing with them as equals or in some kind of diplomatic capacity might be not the easiest thing to do. There's a lot of talk about exopolitics in this regard, and when I hear people writing or talking about exopolitics, it's often in the context of having a diplomatic relationship and bringing ourselves into this larger galactic community. Well, if that's really going to be the case, we need to find out who these other beings are, and are we really even able to deal with them? My suspicion is that we're never really going to be able to deal with them, but we're going to have to nonetheless. It's like you're never really ready to have a baby. We're never really ready to be a parent, but yet, here comes a child and you have to do it. And I think that we'll only be ready to deal with an extraterrestrial intelligence when we are forced into the situation, when it is presented to us in a way that shocks many, many people. But I think after the initial shock, it's quite possible to be able to deal with it. The other things that I discussed that are a little more pragmatic are how a disclosure might affect our infrastructure here on Earth. It's one thing to talk about joining the galactic community, but it's another thing to ask ourselves, how will disclosure affect global finance? How will it affect social stability and cultures on Earth? For example, one thing I would predict is that there would be, just like in many third world nations, a split between the traditionalists and the modernizers. So if an extraterrestrial presence is openly acknowledged here, I guarantee you that there would be many people who would say, we must be like them, we have to do what they do to get to their level, and there would be many other people who would say, no, absolutely not, that would force us to lose the essence of our own humanity. I don't know how that would ever be resolved, but I'm very confident that that kind of thing can happen. It would create, in other words, new problems. It wouldn't necessarily solve all of our problems. In terms of finance or industry, what if, to give one example of many, the aliens have a way of manufacturing a vastly superior version of steel, putting our steel industry out of business? It may not sound like a big deal in the long run to some people, but look, there are many serious financial interests in the steel industry, or in the petroleum industry, or in any number of other industries. And would the acknowledgement of this reality then cause stocks around the world to plummet? Or would it cause them to rise? Hard to say. Would there be lawsuits among defense contractors? As another example. For instance, if I'm one defense contractor and I learn that my competitors had access for many years to exotic technology to study and I haven't, would I be interested in instituting a lawsuit? Well, sure. And I think that sounds very prosaic, but is another possible knotty problem. So I guess what I was trying to do in my talk is to bring up some of the immediate difficulties and some of the long-term difficulties that would come down the road in the event of a disclosure. But it's important for me to emphasize that even though I think that there would be problems, I think it's very likely that the problems would be greater if an acknowledgement doesn't happen. And in fact, it's almost irrelevant what we want to happen. What I think is that human society is moving technologically at such an exponential rate. We consider where we've gone in the last century, from cars, airplanes, electricity, radio, television, atomic bombs, computers. We're obviously not going to stop. We've got an internet now that's in totally unforeseen development even 20 years ago. We're going to be having artificially intelligent computers, nanotechnology, and good God, people are talking about quantum computing. All right, things that are potentially going to continue to revolutionize our society. So we would be fools if we assumed that our understanding of the world around us is going to stand still also. And it seems to me very likely that when we look at our society 20 years from now, it's going to be a very, very different animal. One in which it's very possible that a knowledge of the extraterrestrial presence is a given, simply because of our ability to learn things in the future that we may not be able to do right now. So the disclosure is going to happen. I think it is inevitable. And at that point, we're going to need to deal with a lot of messy issues, which is our history. Nothing's ever been easy. Nothing is guaranteed to be easy in the future. So it's all part of our history and all part of our future.